Well, welcome back to another episode of Driven by Cause. This episode is brought to you by Ariba, the thought leaders behind the industry's only completely integrated and fully automated, all-in-one digital fundraising, donor relationship management database, healthcare hospitality, and auction software platform. I'm joined by my awesome co-host, Jay Fisk. Jay, how are you doing today?
David, as always, I am doing great. It's great to be here and looking forward to another exciting episode.
Well, Jay, you're absolutely right. Today it's going to be a great episode because we have an amazing guest. Jayme Dingler is the founder and CEO of What's Good for Consulting. Prior to starting her own consulting firm, Jayme served as the marketing and development director for the Talbot Interfaith Shelter. In her 3 years at the organization, she was able to expand communications and fundraising programs and increasing income from $300,000 to just under $1 million. Today, she helps nonprofits who are at the cusp of expanding, growing their marketing and fundraising. She is also the author of the Itty Bitty book of nonprofit fundraising. Thank you for being here today, Jayme.
Yeah, hi. It's so nice to be here. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm very excited.
Well, we're so happy you could be here with us today too, Jayme. And, can you share with our listeners, I know I said a lot of things, but could you share with our listeners some information about yourself and how you got started in the nonprofit industry?
Yeah, I think like a lot of people that end up in nonprofit, especially in the development side of things, they describe themselves as an accidental fundraiser. I didn't go to school for marketing or fundraising or anything like that. I was working in financial services and my boss was on the board of this local homeless shelter that we had all volunteered at. And they were looking for new board members. And I said, do you think that they would be interested in having me on their board? And he said, absolutely, and brought me on. And I just absolutely fell in love. I fell in love with the mission and I fell in love with the idea of being able to build a community around something. And so I really just took on more and more and more as a board member, doing more communication stuff. I had ideas for fundraising and fundraisers. They have their 9th annual lip sync battle coming up, which was my little baby. And it's grown into this like community phenomenon that is now $100,000 plus event. And so when they started out as kind of a rotating shelter and then they got a permanent shelter facility. When that happened, they really needed somebody to come on and do more. And so I was able to make that switch from board member to staff member. And it was such a period of just incredibly rapid growth. And then COVID hit during that time as well. And I started getting a lot of calls from other organizations that saw the success that TIS was having and saw our marketing and saw the growth. And they were asking for advice. They were asking for help. And I really didn't, if you know anything about development, when you're a development director, you don't really have the capacity to do much else. But I thought, enough people are asking for help that I feel like I could really make a bigger impact in my community by becoming a consultant and helping, multiple organizations at a time. And so that's what we did in mid 2021. I started What's Good LLC and it's been wonderful. And I still get to work with the shelter all the time on a consulting basis. And so it's great to see how far they've come. And it's great to be able to work with so many other worthy organizations with just incredible missions. So fulfilling.
Well, we are so glad that you joined us today, Jayme. I'm excited to get some of your answers coming up. But the first question I have for you is your itty bitty book of nonprofit fundraising, tips for board members from a development director who hates asking people for money. It's a great title. It's a great short, yet very impactful read. What was your inspiration in writing that book? And was there a specific gap in resources for board members that you aimed to fill?
Yeah, I really didn't set out to write a book. When I became a development director, board engagement was so important to me. That was actually one of my favorite parts of being a development director, was working with the board. And I listen to the experts, and the experts say, work closely with your boards and engage them, because they're donors and volunteers too. They deserve to be cultivated. And so we had really built a lot of board engagement. TIS had expanded again. They bought another shelter, and I was really just looking for a board gift that would kind of reinforce all of the things that we had been working towards and building. And so I went online and I was trying to find, there are tons of, I did not invent anything new with this book. There are tons of books on engaging boards and fundraising, but one of the things I found is that a lot of those books are very long. And, I think there's a tendency when you write a book to, you feel like it has to be a certain length because you're writing this book and having it published. And there's always a lot of fluff. And I looked at a lot of the books and I thought, if I hand this to a board member who is a busy volunteer, it's going to get tossed in the corner and they're not going to even crack it open. The other thing was, a lot of the books were kind of expensive. And so, thinking about spending, $30 times 15 people, knowing that, 14 of them were going to throw it in the corner and never read it. I thought, this just isn't right. I know exactly what I want them to know. And I'll just write it myself. And it ended up being, I think, like 43 pages or 41 pages, something. And I made it, really reasonably priced so that anybody could afford to get this for their board. And it's worked out really well so far. I can see my little Amazon tracker when people are buying, for their board. You can see, 20 here, 10 here. And so it's very exciting that other people are finding value in this little tiny resource. And I do get good feedback when I go and meet with board members to do training and things like that. So it's been an exciting journey doing this book. And there are books 2 and 3 are up here. So we're just for those to come back out.
Well, don't forget, Jayme, simplicity with impact is amazing. And I'm glad you and I had an opportunity to discuss before the show how difficult it can be to engage your board in fundraising. And we know there's all sorts of challenges, especially like you said, when they are volunteers. There are different theories for why that might be. Can you share what you believe are some common misconceptions of board members have about fundraising, and how does your book address them?
Yeah, actually, this is such a timely question because I had a training session with the board of a local organization last night. And the first thing I asked, I say, show of hands, how many people just absolutely love fundraising and they can't wait to do it and they're so excited to do it. And of course, nobody raises their hand. And then I said, okay, well, talk to me about why that is. And I'm not kidding you, this room, there were 13 people in this room, and almost all of them in unison said, I don't want to ask people for money. And so I think that is the biggest misconception, and it's the biggest disservice to boards, that this is the notion that they have going into the idea of fundraising, is that they have to basically beg everyone they know for money, and that's their job as a board member. And it's just simply not true. Fundraising fundamentally is not about asking people for money. It's about building relationships and getting people emotionally invested in your mission so that they then become financially invested. And when you look at it from that perspective, it's like a whole world of ideas opens up to you. And, when you approach, I love doing these trainings with board members, because when we have this conversation, and as soon as I say that, and I say, every board member is a complete human being with, different availability and skills and talents and comfort levels, and shouldn't be asked to all do the same thing. And you can personalize your commitment to fundraising for your organization. You can start to see the shift, and you can start to see the light bulb go off that oh, this is not what I thought it was. And there are things that I can do that I actually would feel comfortable doing. And so I think that's something that, particularly small and mid-sized organizations struggle with a lot. Think at larger organizations, you kind of know you're being asked to be on the board because you can give and you can get. But in these smaller and mid-sized organizations, these are people who know the community. They're people that have a knowledge base or a skill set that's important to the mission, and so they're not necessarily being asked to the board because of what's in their bank account or their ability to bring in, oodles and oodles of money. And so I think that gets glossed over. The fundraising part of it gets glossed over when they're invited to be on the board. And it really does a disservice because it's not that scary. It's not that scary.
So, okay, so along those lines, can you share some new strategies, technologies, or best practices for increasing board fundraising that you've seen organizations have some good success with?
I don't know that it's really anything new. It's not really a new concept, but, personalizing every board member's involvement in fundraising, what their commitments are, it's not one size fits all. And I know there are a lot of organizations that say like, give or get $5,000, or we have this event coming up. Everybody has to go sell 30 tickets. And, people shut down when they're asked to do things that make them feel uncomfortable. And so approaching your board members, like the unique human beings that they are, and going over your development plan, talking to them about, what is your availability? What is your energy level? What is your social comfort level? Do you want to ask people for money? We can facilitate that. If you don't, that's okay. You don't have to be the asker. What are your talents and passions? What else are you involved in the community? Like, how can we take who you are and find a way for you to participate in our development plan that makes sense for you? And that can range. The range is anywhere from writing thank you notes to chairing an event to, schmoozing people at an event, or inviting somebody to sit at your table, inviting people for a tour. So there's just, the world's your oyster when you open it up that way. And when people find something that they're comfortable with doing, they're much more apt to follow through with their commitment than if you just kind of force it down their throat.
A quick follow-up question to that is, do you find when you're dealing with these boards, the smaller boards, not the big, but the small organizations, do board members tend to belong to numerous or several boards with some commonality?
Sometimes. I think it varies, but yeah, there are always a few board members that are involved in a lot of things. To me, it's kind of a little bit of overextension. And it does cause some conflicts. You want to be involved in as much as you can, but, my advice would be to do a term on one board and really fully commit yourself to that mission, and then go and do a term on another board of an organization that means something to you, because you really end up splitting your energy, and it does cause some conflicts if you're trying to, raise funds for multiple organizations at a time. I did want to mention, just because we're talking about new techniques, I sat on a webinar several months ago with a woman. Her name is Sabrina Walker Hernandez. She's out of Texas. Her organization is called Supporting World Hope. When she was an executive director, the way that she engaged her board of directors, she did a couple of things that I thought were really ingenious. One was she basically created this kind of gamification of board fundraising. And so you had to, each board member, the goal was to get to, I think she said like 15 points by the end of the fiscal year. And there were different ways that you could earn points to get to your 15 points. And it just kind of made it fun. It made it a little bit of, a little bit competitive without being, offensive and pitting people against each other. It's just a good motivator. I thought that sounded really fun. The other thing that she did, which I thought was so great, and it just makes perfect sense, is she really put a lot of fanfare around the fact that these folks were serving on this board of directors. And so she would have like a local judge or somebody prominent in the community come and kind of read them in at the beginning of the fiscal year, kind of do a ceremony, and then at the end of every fiscal year, they would have an event where they talked about, they celebrated the year and thanked the board members for everything that they had done and all the accomplishments for the year. So I just thought those were phenomenal ideas. I haven't actually tried them, but it just sounds like a great way to get people motivated. And then one more thing, and I know we'll probably talk about this a little bit later, but my husband and I are actually, I can't give away too much, but hopefully at the beginning of the fiscal year starting July 1st, we will have a new technology out in the world that can help streamline the whole process of board involvement in fundraising and just turn this conversation nobody wants to have into a really easy conversation that you can then track everybody's commitments and keep everything in one place and organize and facilitate everybody in fulfilling their commitments.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah. And Jayme, when we're talking about that, I really appreciate you sharing the audience about that individual and the gamification. And we did an amazing webinar because part of that educational webinar about board members and you really hit it on it. And I think it's one, recognizing that, that they raise money. I think technology for people that don't want to ask directly for funds, but if you can give them technology in a way like a peer-to-peer fundraising, and I don't mean just a traditional peer-to-peer where it's a third party and then you got to move the data, but something that's fully integrated and not only acknowledging them at a board meeting on how much they raised or they exceeded their goal or they're on track to reach their goal, depending upon, the year that they're doing it. But I think other things that people are missing out on is acknowledging them, because if you do have the right technology, you can actually show not only how much they raised, but then creating best practices allows them to go back and say, not only did you exceed your goal, whatever that was, but you actually helped bring in X amount of new potential donors that want to participate now, and acknowledge that in a board meeting. And I also love that. I think what's missing is there's a lot of events because they're raising money and they do events, but having events to acknowledge contributions from your board members is so essential because it makes them feel good. I love that.
And I think a lot of organizations kind of take their boards for granted. They forget these are donors and volunteers too, and they deserve the same stewardship that you're asking them to give other donors and volunteers. And I think, that also has a lot to do with whether they're going to be involved in being an ambassador for your organization, because you have to cultivate their emotional investment just as much as you have to cultivate anyone else's emotional investment.
That's right. Yeah. Especially when it's so close to home. You've got your friend right there. Just acknowledge that. Don't take it for granted. Hey, in your book, you described yourself, which I loved, as a development director who hates asking people for money. Wow. That's an interesting thing to say, right? What key piece of advice would you offer to the nonprofit board members who are new to fundraising or to those who struggle with actually making the ask?
Yeah, you don't have to make the ask, right? Fundraising is really about relationship building. And that's where I excelled. I came from customer service. And that's really how I approach fundraising and donor stewardship, is just really great customer service, making people feel like they are part of something, that you care about them, that you appreciate them, you appreciate their business. And so that's really what it is, building relationships. And so, you don't have to be the asker. And really, you don't want to just go out and ask people for money, right? Most donors need several what they call touches before they're ready to open up their checkbook and write a check to your organization, And so you can be part of those touches. You can, give a testimonial, invite a friend to an event. You can, just be a good ambassador, share your passion for your mission. That's something that, that's something that I feel like I excel in because I'm a very, I get very excited about things. I don't know if you can tell, but when you're passionate about something, you can almost see the moment where that passion starts rubbing off on somebody else and they get excited about it. And so, one of the greatest things, and I cannot remember who it was, I was on a seminar or a webinar. One of the presenters said, if you go to a movie and you love the movie, what's the first thing you do? What next time you see your friend, you say, what, this movie was so amazing. You have to go see it. Well, what did you just do? You just fundraised for the movie company. And we don't have any second thoughts about doing that. It doesn't even occur to us that we're just sharing something that we just thought was the greatest thing in the world. And we wanted somebody else to experience that. It can be that way with in the nonprofit world. And that's really what the basis of fundraising should be.
So that probably ties in then to my next question, which is aside from the fundraising side, because you made it very clear that, not all board members are really wanting to be, heavily involved in that. Well, would you be able to share some other expectations that executive leadership should have of their board? And I saw you just mentioned one, be passionate about the cause, talk about it, right? Talk about the event it is to attend and so forth. So can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. So I think it's really important before you even talk about, what are the expectations that leadership should have. There's something that should be expected of leadership, which is before somebody even joins the board, they have to be transparent and communicate what that board member's duties are going to be once they join the board. I think this gets a kind of short shrift in the recruiting process. It sounds good to say you're going to be on the board of directors of this organization, but if you don't really understand what that means, you're going to end up getting blindsided, when people start coming to you and asking you to do things that you didn't know you were going to be asked to do. And so you end up with a lot of, in my mind, I call them kind of board members in name only. They show up to a board meeting, they don't really participate, and then that's it. You don't see or hear from them. They just kind of are there. And so I think, if any organization that's listening, if you don't have a board roles and responsibility sheet, if you don't have a board fundraising policy, put those things together before you start recruiting your next board members, because that's something that should be handed to them before they say yes to being on your board, so that they fully understand what their responsibilities are. There are two major functions that a board of directors has: fundraising and governance. So board members really need to be educated about what the organization is, what the mission is, but also the services that you provide, how the organization is run. They should be involved and understand, all of the policies and procedures that go into that, and be involved in setting those policies and procedures. One of the biggest jobs that board members have is to be good financial stewards. You have to be good stewards of the money that's coming in from your donors and make sure it's being spent prudently, and then being involved in strategic planning, and not just what is the vision for, what we want the organization to be in the future, where we want it to be, but what are the steps to get us there, and be involved in taking those steps. So it's really important to just be very transparent. I think a lot of people get taken aback because they don't know, especially first-time board members, they don't really know what to expect. And so it's just really important to be very upfront. It's not for everybody. And what I've been telling my organizations lately is that it's so much better for your organization to have a smaller board of people who really understand their role as board members and are willing to to put in the time and commitment to, to make the organization run well, to bring in the resources to fulfill your mission, than it is to have a bunch of people who you would like their name attached to the organization, but they're not really fully committed to the role of board member. And then you just kind of spending your time herding cats instead of, carrying out the mission and bringing in the resources you need.
Yeah. Jayme, thanks. It's always great to have conversations about books. And like you said, we talk about movies but we actually got to talk to the author about a book today. And I'm glad we got to speak about your recent book. So it's not just about, discussing a book and, having a book club, but this has been really awesome. But you're also, which is really amazing, the founder and CEO of What's Good Consulting, which offers services for fundraising, marketing, training, and strategy. And as a thought leader who is working with organizations daily, what are some of the biggest challenges you find nonprofits are facing today? And what changes should organizations make to solve these challenges?
Yeah, I think, there are a few things that come to mind. One is I'm seeing a lot of organizations that are having staffing issues. And that comes from there are kind of two sides to that. One is not being able to find or retain quality people. The other side of it is kind of having these morale and I hate to use the word kind of behavioral issues, but that really is what it is. And on both fronts, I feel like it's because nonprofit organizations are a business, but a lot of times we don't really approach them as such. And they're also filled with people who lead from the heart and they're not necessarily thinking of it from a business perspective and how to make things professional. So the first thing is, if you're not going to get quality people if you're not willing to provide the salary and benefits that are competitive to attract those people that you need to carry your mission into the future. It sounds really scary, and a lot of organizations would say, well, but we don't have the budget for that. Make the budget for that, because the right people are going to pay for themselves and then some. If you keep having this turnover or you keep having this, accidental, temporary interim, position, it's costing you money. That's costing you money. It's costing you time. It's costing you, impact that you could be having on your community. And so I say, put those practices in place, look at what's competitive. It's okay. I think people think, everybody that works at a nonprofit needs to be living just above the poverty line. That's not what that means. Nonprofit doesn't mean people can't make money doing good work, right? The other part of it is, I think nonprofits, because they tend to grow pretty rapidly, and again, you're so focused on your mission, there's a tendency to forget to put structure and policies and procedures and consequences in place for staff, for clients. And so what ends up happening is it's a group of kind and compassionate people, and that's wonderful. And you want to be friendly, but people need structure. And when you kind of skip over the step where you're implementing the structure, it can really lead to a lack of kind of professionalism in the implementation of the mission. And it just causes a lot of unnecessary friction and wastes a lot of time that should be spent fulfilling the mission. So I would say, if you don't have these kind of HR policies and procedures in place, put those in place. The other thing is, don't just expand for expansion's sake, right? I get that organizations want to expand as the need grows, as you should, but you don't have to just keep going to say, oh, we've got to grow. Give your organization time to breathe. After you have a big period of growth, you've got to grow into your new operating budget and make sure that's sustainable. Give your development program time to adjust. Give your donors time to adjust. Give your staff time to adjust and work out the kinks and make sure that everything is running smoothly before you go on to the next phase of expansion. Don't just keep rolling, because it causes a lot of unnecessary stress and strain. And you want to be really good at what you do and not just, kind of okay a bunch of different things. You want to make sure that you're really good at what you do. So, don't expand just to expand. Take your time, do it strategically, be really thoughtful about it. And, make sure you're doing it the right way and not oversaddling, overburdening your staff, making the expectations from a budget perspective, the fundraising perspective too high. That can cause a lot of issues for an organization. So those are the three things that I'm kind of seeing a lot of right now, that hopefully some folks will hear this and go, oh, maybe we should calm down a little bit.
Well, speaking of calming down, we're going to shift gears on you right now a little bit. You've spoken a lot about the work. We get all that. It's wonderful. But I think our audience would be curious to know, is there something that might surprise them about you to find out? I mean, it's a hobby background, something completely maybe unrelated to your work. What might our audience be surprised about?
Yeah, so my alter ego's name is Jayme D, and she is a professional musician. Actually have a degree in music, and that's my little side gig. What I call my happy fun time is I get to go out into my community, play music and sing for people. And yeah, that's one of my favorite things to do.
What are your instruments? What instruments do you play?
Well, I sing and then I play guitar, but I'm not a great guitarist. I play to sing. I play so I can be able to sing, but singing is my passion. I love connecting with people in this world. I love going out and being able to connect with people. And, when you sing that one song that, oh, that was my grandmother's favorite song, or, oh, that was our wedding song, making that connection is just so wonderful. It's one of my favorite things in the whole wide world.
Nice.
Jayme, not only do you have passion for your book, your company, but now you got this passion and energy to make people happy. That's wonderful. Which leads me to this. We always like to finish our show by asking you one question. What is something that we didn't ask you that you wish we did?
Yeah, I guess it would be great. I would love to give a few pointers on just some things to think about when you're putting your development plan together. From a fundraising perspective, there are some things to think about. Your operating budget should not be your fundraising goal. And I think that's something a lot of organizations, skip over. They think, oh, we just have to raise this much. Your goal should be beyond that, because you need to be focused on the sustainability of your mission. I think there's a fear of raising more than you spend in the nonprofit world. And it's a really interesting thing, because I've seen it many times. And it's just really interesting to me because, donors will understand if you've raised more money and you're putting that towards making sure that you can continue fulfilling your mission in perpetuity. You don't always want to be within $1 of your operating budget. That's terrifying, right? You should have, aim for 6 months of operating budget in the bank, plus, working towards an endowment or a quasi endowment, something that you're carrying your mission into the future and not just, what do we have to do to survive this year? That's a really big thing. Another thing is, so this kind of goes along with the idea of running your nonprofit as a business, just like any good financial advisor would tell you, don't invest all your money in one stock. Don't invest all of your time and energy in one revenue source. I know there are a lot of people freaking out about the fact that government grants could get cut. And if you are really freaking out about it, your organization needs to have a very serious conversation about your fundraising strategy, because You really have to diversify. There are many, many ways that you can bring in money, and you should never be dependent on just one source of revenue, because that's a way that you can shut down an organization really quickly that is doing a lot of good work in your community. And grants, especially government grants, it's notoriously unstable. And this is money that kind of falls out of the sky sometimes. We don't know where it's coming from, and that you should not expect it to continue. Find other ways to make sure, and that goes along with, raising more than you need for your operating budget, is make sure you've got that extra money in case one of your revenue sources falls short. And then the last thing I would say is, every organization should have some kind of development plan. And when you're putting your development plan together, do it with your board members in mind, because you really want to build in opportunities for your board members to take ownership of parts of your fundraising plans for the year. Build in places where they can raise their hand and say, I would like to help with that. So those are the kind of things. The other thing is, don't leave out marketing. I think a lot of people focus a lot on fundraising and forget about marketing. They go hand in hand. They absolutely inform one another. If people don't know about your mission, then they can't give to it. So it's really important to put attention towards your marketing. How are you communicating? Not just where, but what are you saying? And what are you giving your board members? What kinds of language, what kinds of information are you giving your ambassadors so that they can go out and spread the word about your mission in your community?
Yeah, no, that's great. Jayme, that was really fantastic. One of the things you said, I just want to capitalize, because I think everybody has this concern right now about what's going on with the grants. And you're absolutely right, having multiple channels. And I've seen it. We have a phenomenal foundation, I won't mention the name, who does amazing work with, supporting children and placements in homes and caseworkers. And they were relying 100% literally on grant money. It's a big number, and it's a huge facility. And this happened once before. So this is, government grants is not something, new that, oh my God, this is shocking. And you're absolutely right. You should be prepared. They lost 18% of their grant money. And when that relates to it, but I will tell you, I congratulated them because they shifted. They actually hired immediately a development director. They did some wonderful things. They found new ways of taking those challenges. And we are actually, and I think these are so important. It's not an advertisement, but it's an educational webinar on March 4th.
Surviving. I just saw that today.
Oh my God, I'm glad, and I just want to, we're all concerned, and we love helping and giving direction. It is not a sales pitch. I don't believe in that stuff. And but these are really good things. And when you brought that up, it was like, oh, let me bring that up. But
I was going to bring up your webinar because I got the email this morning. I saw the headline. I was like, oh, I should mention that.
We try and do whatever we can do. We have great experts on doing a lot of this stuff. But Jayme, that was really great. I love your passion. And with that, we'll be right back after this message. All right?
We are a team that has had an enduring influence on the nonprofit industry for more than 3 decades. We pride ourselves on developing and delivering technology with a purpose, software born of a genuine understanding and passion for cause. We are relentlessly dedicated to our client success. We are with our clients for good. We are Arriva, tech with purpose, driven by cause. Arriva is the trusted advisor and market leader of fundraising, donor relationship management, and auction software and services. Exceed further, our evolutionary all-in-one digital fundraising and donor relationship management software is helping nonprofits worldwide further their mission, transform fundraising, and cultivate relationships with donors and constituents. Our Maestro Auction virtual, live, and silent auction software, text-to-bid, virtual and mobile bidding software, and text-to-fund, text-based donation software are helping nonprofits raise billions of dollars through thousands of virtual fundraising events, charity auctions, and galas. Visit Arriva.com and reach out today and see how Arriva can help your nonprofit organization go further.
Welcome back, everyone. All right, we're going to go into our next segment, Ask the Maestro. I love this, actually. Jay, what question do you have from our audience today?
David, we have a very interesting question that came from Michelle. And she says she'd be interested to hear what Jayme's thoughts are on how to start a donor base from scratch. Do you have any tips on how to start a donor base when you don't have a donor base?
That's a great question. It's tough when you're kind of starting from scratch. You have to try and find your people, right? I think that needs to happen pretty organically. Social media is a really great tool for that. One thing that people forget about on social media is the groups function. And I found it incredibly helpful, especially as the algorithms change and it makes it more difficult for people to organically see your post. Yeah. Find the community groups that are in your area and start posting about your mission. You're not going to find donors right away. First of all, let me just make that clear. Like, you're not going to go out into the world and money's going to shower down on you. And if you do, can you come back and tell me what you did or who the people are? But the idea is to start putting it out there and identifying the people, build your following, start identifying the people that are, interested in helping with your mission. The best thing you can do is provide volunteer opportunities for people. If people have a heart for volunteering and they have a heart for your mission, that's the quickest way to get somebody emotionally invested in what you're doing. And those people will very often be converted into donors. And so I think, social media is a great tool. It's kind of a necessary evil. It's not my favorite thing in the world, but it really is the best way to help find your community. And so I would say, particularly if you're on Facebook, I think, still, a lot of the other platforms are catching up, but I would still say the majority of people who are kind of donor age are on Facebook. And it still is, one of the largest platforms. They have that group function. So if you can go and do a search for groups that exist in your community, just in our small little community here, there are probably, in our little 5-county area, there are probably 40 or 50 different community groups for the different towns. And they all have, a few hundred people up to a few thousand people in them. And so you can go on, you can create a post on your page, and then you can share it out to the community groups and, go back and engage people. If they're reacting to your posts, you can click on where it shows the number of likes on Facebook. You can click on that and it'll pull up the list of people that have reacted to that post, even in the community groups. And it'll give you the opportunity to invite them to follow your page so that they can see more information about what's going on with your organization. You can also, you might be able to reach out to them via Messenger and try and engage them that way. The other thing is, there are a lot of kind of free things you can do, but you need to be in people's faces. And so as often as you can be putting out press releases about what's going on with your organization, I would always recommend at least once a month. Find something that's going on that you can put out a press release. It doesn't cost you any money. It's getting out in front of your community. Send it to all of the local media outlets. You never know, even the radio outlets, they might mention it. Even the news, TV news outlets, they might do a little mention of it. And so, these are the things that don't cost a lot. I know you're a small organization, but really your job at the beginning is just to go out and start finding your people and give them opportunities to kind of get their hearts into what it is that you're doing. That was
awareness, right? It's all about awareness.
Yeah, that was very long-winded. So
No, that's okay. That's great. It was a good. No, it was a great answer. It's a very thorough answer, and hopefully that'll help Michelle and others that are listening as well. And if you have a question that you'd like to submit for Ask the Maestro, please do send it to us, and perhaps we'll use your question on our next segment of Ask the Maestro.
Hey, Jay, thanks for that very much. And Jayme, it has been a pleasure having you with us today. It was for me, it was a really great treat to have you talk about so many different things, your book, and the fact that you're the author of that book, that you're consulting, the wonderful things that you're doing. So it was really great. Thank you so much for all of your insights and your advice to our listeners.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. This has been super fun. I love to talk. So anytime you want me back, I'll be happy to come back.
Good deal.
Count on it, Jayme. We absolutely do that. We love it. And I want to thank all of our listeners for joining us today. Make sure you subscribe to Driven by Cause. And while you're at it, leave us not a 4-star, but a 5-star rating. I also want to give you a thank you to all of our amazing sponsors, Ariba. Thank you to all of our fantastic listeners. We hope you'll join us next time on Driven by Cause. Make it a great day. Thank you.